Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something really fundamental for, well, pretty much all the visuals we see, the key differences between vector and raster images.
Yeah, it's a core concept. And you sent over some great material that frames it almost like a showdown, vector man versus raster woman.
Exactly. It's a fun way to look at it. So we're going to dive deep into what actually makes these two image types different.
It's interesting, isn't it? We interact with both types constantly.
Yeah.
Every single day, but probably don't stop to think about how they're built or why it matters for, what we're trying to achieve.
Right. And that's why this deep dive is hopefully useful for you listening. If you're designing a logo, prepping photos for a website, even thinking about print or, say, embroidery, getting these differences is crucial.
It really is. It can save a lot of frustration down the line.
Definitely. So we'll be drawing on excerpts from that document you shared, Vector Man vs. Raster Woman, which lays things out really clearly. Our mission today: make those distinctions sharp, explore the practical side, and show why both vector and raster are, well, essential tools in graphics.
Sounds good. Where should we start? The very basics.
Let's do it right at the foundation.
Yeah.
How are these things actually constructed? Let's start with Vector Man.
Okay. So vector images, at their heart, they're built using mathematical equations. It's like a recipe, a set of instructions.
Instructions.
Yeah, instructions that tell the computer how to draw things, lines, curves, shapes, that define where points are, how lines connect them, how curves bend, all using math. The document calls them geometrical instructions, which is, I think, a perfect description.
So it's not mapping out dots, it's defining the shapes themselves.
Exactly. It uses things called nodes, like anchor points, to control these paths. And because it's math-based, you can get incredibly precise, which is why it's great for things like technical drawings, blueprints, anywhere accuracy is paramount.
That makes sense. Instructions, not a fixed picture. So what about Raster Woman then? How's she different?
Raster images are, well, completely different in their approach. No math equations defining shapes. Instead, think of a grid, like a digital mosaic.
A mosaic.
Yeah, a grid made up of tiny squares called pixels. Each pixel in that grid has a specific color value assigned to it. The document describes it as a collection of cells, known as pixels. That's precisely it. The image is just a map of all these colored squares.
Okay, a grid of colored dots. Got it.
This difference in how they store data, equations versus pixel map, has big implications, especially for things like web performance and loading times. Optimizing those raster images is key for web stuff.
So equations versus a grid, that fundamental difference must really come into play when you try to change the size, right? Our first battle, scaling the design.
Yes. And this is where Vector Man really shines. Probably the biggest advantage. You can scale a vector image, make it bigger, smaller, absolutely massive without any loss of quality.
None at all.
None. Because it's based on those mathematical instructions, when you resize it, the software just recalculates the math for the new size. The document puts it simply. With Vector, you can easily scale the design without loss of quality. It stays perfectly crisp.
Like resizing a recipe, as you said earlier, adjust the amounts, proportions stay the same.
Exactly. It feels almost like magic sometimes.
Especially compared to what happens with raster images, right?
Oh, absolutely. Raster Woman faces a fundamental limit here. Because she's made of a fixed number of those pixels, when you try to enlarge the image, the software has to stretch those pixels out.
And that's when you get that blocky look.
That's exactly it. The individual squares become visible, things look blurry, jagged, we call it pixelation. There's a definite loss of quality. The document is blunt. With raster, you cannot scale the design without loss of quality. We've all seen it trying to blow up a small photo, right? It just falls apart visually.
It's definitely a familiar pain point. And the next comparison in the document really hammers this home: visually magnification and quality.
It really does. It shows Vector Man and Raster Woman starting at the same resolution, then zoomed way in. Vector Man gets magnified by something crazy like 76,796%.
76,000%. Wow.
Yeah. And the image is still sharp. But Raster Woman, she only gets to about 800% magnification before the pixelation becomes really obvious and everything gets fuzzy.
Okay, those numbers, nearly 77,000 versus 800, that is a massive difference. That really nails the scalability point. It's a proper aha moment.
It really is. It just perfectly illustrates that Vector, being instruction-based, can scale almost infinitely in theory. Raster, limited by its pixel grid, hits that quality ceiling much, much sooner.
Clear win for Vector Man on scaling. Okay, what about changing the image itself after it's made? The modification battle. How easy is it to tweak vectors?
Vectors are super flexible here. A document points out that every point called a node, can be modified, and you can add new nodes anywhere on a curve. Think of grabbing those anchor points and reshaping things.
It's like pulling on a digital rubber band.
Kind of, yeah. You can easily reshape lines, adjust curves, and changing colors is straightforward, too. You can easily add things to the design without messing up the quality of what's already there. It's very fluid.
Seems very editable. How does Raster Woman compare? Can you modify raster images easily?
Well, not quite as easily, no. The document calls raster images static and not modifiable, which is maybe a bit strong, but it highlights the core difference. You can edit raster images, of course cut, copy, paste, change colors, using software like Photoshop. But it's different. The document adds the caveat. It is possible to cut and change the image, but lining up the images must be very precise. Because you're working pixel by pixel, making really fine adjustments or blending new elements seamlessly is harder. You're essentially painting over or erasing individual squares, not manipulating underlying shapes.
Right, it's more like detailed pixel surgery versus reshaping the whole form. Okay, let's think about where we actually see these types, the usage battle. Where does Raster Woman dominate?
Raster is, well, pretty much everywhere in terms of display. The document notes that most consumer monitors are raster-based. It mentions Internet Explorer specifically, but the point holds for most web browsers and general screen viewing.
So what we see on our screens day to day is mostly raster.
Overwhelmingly, yes, especially online. That wide compatibility makes raster the go-to format for photos, web graphics, and loads of applications. She's kind of the queen of digital display.
Makes sense. So where does that leave Vector Man in terms of usage?
Vector graphics are absolutely crucial in the creation stage, particularly for things like logos, illustrations, technical drawings, anything that needs scalability and precise editing. But, as the document says, the usage of Vector declines outside a design environment.
Because fewer programs just display them natively.
Exactly. Often, vector designs need to be exported or converted into a raster format, like a JPEG or PNG, to be used more broadly, especially online or in software, not specifically built for vector graphics.
So, design in Vector, deploy as raster. That seems common. Okay, let's talk efficiency file size. Who travels lighter?
Generally, Vector Man does. The document explains that vector files store those mathematical equations, aka geometrical instructions. Instead of saving info for every single pixel, it just stores the recipe.
Much less data to store.
Right. Now, the document does mention an exception. With really complex vectors with extensive data, it can be memory intensive to process, but usually vector files are significantly smaller.
Storing the recipe, not the finished cake with every crumb listed. What about Raster Woman's file size?
Raster files can get pretty hefty. Because they store the color value for a collection of cells, known as pixels, the size adds up quickly. The more pixels you have, and the more colors each pixel can be, the bit depth, the bigger the file.
Is there an example?
Yep, the document gives one. A 1280 by 1280 pixel image with 24-bit RGB color, that's millions of colors, needs almost 4.7 megabytes. Even if you drop it to 8-bit color, 256 colors, it's still over 1.5 megabytes. So high-resolution, full-color raster images take up significant space.
That really drives home the difference storage-wise. Okay, let's talk about color itself. The color battle, strengths and weaknesses.
For Vector, the document highlights flexibility. It says, typically the developer can select the color model that they wish to use, like RGB or CMYK, and even calibrate tools. But it also notes a limitation. Due to limitations in current mathematical equations for vector colors, there are limits on the richness of color. Meaning achieving really subtle gradients, photorealistic blends, that kind of deep color complexity can be harder purely with vectors.
Okay, flexibility in how you define color, but maybe less nuance within the color itself. What about Raster Women's colors?
Raster images, the document says, typically use RGB color models, though editing software often supports CMYK too. They're limited to the color options of the color model chosen. But the big advantage is, because they store color info pixel by pixel, they can capture incredible richness and detail.
Like in photographs.
Exactly. All those smooth tones and subtle variations in a photo that's perfectly suited to the raster approach, especially when using color models with a wide gamut, like Adobe RGB, which the appendix mentions.
Got it. Now, a term that trips people up, resolution. How does this apply in the Vector Man versus Raster Woman showdown?
This is a really important distinction. The document states clearly that resolution, in the traditional sense, does not apply to vector images
Why not?
because they scale infinitely without quality loss. They don't have a fixed number of pixels per inch built in. Instead, you design in vector, and then you export it into a raster format at a specific resolution needed for its final use, like 300 dpi for print or 72 ppi for web.
So resolution is an output setting for vectors?
Precisely. And the document advises exporting to the dimensions which it will be used for to get the best results.
Okay. And for Raster Woman, resolution is fundamental, isn't it?
Absolutely fundamental. For raster, resolution is the measure of detail stored. The document breaks it down. It involves the pixel dimensions, width plus the height, the color bit depth, how many colors, and clarity, which is usually expressed as dpi or ppi, the density of pixels. A raster image has a fixed resolution from the moment it's created or saved.
Let's move to the physical world. Printing. Can both get along with printers?
Yes, the document confirms that software allows both vector and raster files to be printed directly. The main thing is ensuring the printer is properly calibrated to reproduce the colors accurately.
Makes sense. What about bleed? Do we still need that border for printing?
The document says bleed may or may not be necessary. It used to be really important with older presses because ink could spread a bit, so you needed that extra margin to trim off for clean edges.
But not so much now.
Less so, generally. As the document notes, modern printers do not have this type of issue due to better inks and application methods. So while still used sometimes, it's often less critical today.
Good to know. Now a trickier application, embroidery. How do our two contenders handle being stitched?
This really shows their differences. Vector Man, the document explains, needs special machine-specific software to convert for embroidery. It uses a great analogy. An embroidery machine is basically a computer numerical control, CNC, machine robot.
It needs precise instructions.
Exactly. Machine code telling the needle exactly where to go, which thread to use. Converting a vector file involves digitizing it, mapping points, planning thread paths, using special software. It's a translation process.
Okay, so vector can be translated for embroidery. What about Raster Woman?
Generally, no. The document says raster images are unable to convert. Because they're just a grid of pixels, they lack those defined lines and curves that the machine needs for instructions. You can't easily tell a machine how to stitch a fuzzy block of pixels.
That makes perfect sense. The machine needs clear paths. Okay, how about working together? Converting between them.
Vector to raster conversion, as we said, is super common. You design in vector, then export it to raster like JPG, PNG, TIFF, for display, web use, etc., a standard workflow.
Right, taking that scalable logo and making it a usable web image. What about the other way around, raster to vector?
That's called vectorization. The document says it uses tracing or edge detection, normally done with software due to complexity. Basically, the software tries to analyze the pixel shapes in a raster image and redraw them as vector paths.
Does it work well?
It can be useful, especially if you only have a low-res raster logo and need a scalable version. But it's often not perfect, particularly with complex photos. It's essentially tracing, and software has limitations.
Okay, last direct comparison. File size management, the compression battle. Can we shrink both types?
Yes, the document confirms both can be compressed. There are algorithms for this. You have lossless compression, which reduces size but keeps all the original data. You can get it back perfectly.
And the other type?
Lossy compression. This removes data considered redundant, maybe very subtle color shifts your eye won't notice. It makes files much smaller, but you do lose a tiny bit of information permanently. Both vector and raster files can use either lossless or lossy methods depending on the file format and settings.
So options for managing file size exist for both. After all these battles, what's the final verdict? The results, according to the document.
The conclusion is quite balanced. It says, while Vector Man has awesome power to be manipulated and scaled, he relies on Raster Woman to be utilized within most forms of medium.
So they need each other.
Pretty much. It emphasizes that while both have your benefits and weakness, together they form the basis of modern graphic development. They're not really rivals, more like essential partners.
A powerful team, really, each playing a critical role. Okay, let's broaden out now and touch on some key related concepts, starting with something vital to both, color.
Absolutely. Color is fundamental. The document's appendix dives into this, starting with common color models. These are systems for defining and organizing color. We've got RGB red, green, blue. Those are the primary colors for screens. Mix them to get others.
And RGBA.
Same thing, but with an A for alpha, which controls transparency. Then there's CMYK cyan, magenta, yellow, and key, which is black. That's the standard for printing.
The appendix lists others too, like sRGB and Adobe RGB.
Right. sRGB is kind of the default standard for the web, aiming for consistency across devices. Adobe RGB has a wider range of colors, a bigger gamut, which is useful for photographers or designers needing more color precision, especially for print.
So different models for different purposes.
Exactly. The appendix also mentions things like ROM RGB, even wider gamut, and hexachrome. Adds orange and green inks to CMYK for richer printing, and of course the basic hexadecimal codes used in web design.
It's quite the spectrum of options, and it briefly touches on primary, secondary, tertiary colors too.
Yeah, the basic color wheel relationships. But it also introduces different color spaces like HSL, HSV, lab. These are described as geometric ways to define color based on things like hue, the actual color, saturation, the intensity, and lightness or value, how bright or dark. Sometimes these are more intuitive for making adjustments.
It's amazing how many ways we can slice and dice color. The document even mentioned the cultural differences in naming colors.
Yes, that was fascinating. It highlights how language and culture shape perception. Examples from Chinese, Irish, Russian, Turkish.
Yeah.
Even one where yellow is seen as a shade of green. And it brings up the marketing color space, using color psychology and association strategically.
It shows color is more than just wavelengths. It's tied to perception and culture. Getting more technical, the appendix talks about measuring light and color too.
It does. Terms like hue, the pure color, intensity or radiance, total light energy, luminance, intensity weighted by how our eyes see it. It also contrasts subjective terms like brightness with measurable ones like illuminance, light hitting a surface, and luminous flux, total light from a source.
And there's a distinction between photometric and radiometric.
Right. Photometric relates to human vision, how bright we perceive something. Radiometric is the pure physical energy of the light, measured in watts, regardless of our perception. The appendix has a table comparing units like lumens, photometric, and watts, radiometric. It's a good reminder our eyes aren't perfect light meters.
Definitely. And there's a table linking light wavelengths to perceived colors.
Yeah, it shows the approximate ranges for violet, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. It also mentions how our eyes' cone cells respond to different wavelengths, the basis of trichromatic color theory, how we see color by combining signals from 3 cone types.
It even clears up false color imaging.
Right. False color is when you assign colors arbitrarily to data to highlight features, often in science or medical imaging. But importantly, the document clarifies the included Mars Viking lander images are not false color. They show the planet's natural colors from different perspectives.
So Mars really is reddish in those famous pictures.
As captured by the landers, yes. The document even describes one image, pointing out parts of the lander and the terrain. And it connects back to design, noting how dominant hues influence perception color psychology. Our choices matter.
And for the practical side, there's that big list of hex color codes.
Oh yeah, super useful. Both standard hex and the X11 codes with names. A great reference for digital work like a massive digital swatch book.
Definitely handy. Lastly, on color, spectral power distributions.
That's a way to scientifically profile a light source. It graphs how much energy the source emits at each wavelength. The table shows examples for standard illuminance like incandescent light, A, overcast daylight, C, and average daylight, D65. It helps standardize color under different lighting.
Very thorough. Okay, let's shift focus one last time to resolution, especially for raster, which can be tricky.
Absolutely. The appendix stresses that resolution isn't just pixel count. That number alone doesn't tell you about color depth, for instance.
Right. 1,000,000 black pixels versus 1,000,000 color ones is different. What other types of resolution does it mention?
It covers spatial resolution, which is the density pixels per inch, PPI, or dots per inch, DPI. That's our usual idea of sharpness, though lens quality affects it too.
Are there more specialized types?
Yes. For things like electron microscopy, there's line fringe resolution and point resolution, how close two things can be and still be distinguished. Then spectral wavelength radiometric resolution, which ties back to color depth, how much color information is captured. You can even enhance this sometimes by compositing layers.
It's not just about space either, is it?
No, there's temporal time resolution, which is frame rate in video, frames per second. More frames mean smoother motion, more temporal detail. And finally, TV lines, TVL, a specific measure for analog video display sharpness.
So resolution is way more complex than just width times height.
Exactly. It's about the amount of distinct information captured spatially, spectrally, even temporally. Pixel count is just one part of that story.
Well, this has certainly been a comprehensive look at vector, raster, color, and resolution. It really feels like Vector Man and Raster Woman are both vital.
Absolutely essential, yeah. Vector brings the scalability and editability. The raster brings the universal display and rich detail. Understanding when to use, which is, well, fundamental to good graphic work.
So for everyone listening, maybe think about your own projects. Are you using the right format for the job based on what we've discussed?
And maybe a thought to ponder.
Yeah.
We mostly view things rasterized on screens now, right? So how might future displays, maybe higher resolution, different technologies start to blur these lines we've talked about? Could the practical difference between vector and raster shrink in the future?
That's a fascinating question. Or, thinking about color, how can a deeper grasp of color science, maybe even its psychological impact, make your visual communication more effective? Lots to chew on there. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.